John Leckie is one of Britain's most acclaimed rock producers. He has produced and engineered music by Muse, the Stone Roses, Radiohead, Pink Floyd and many, many more. An invited audience of 80 record producers gathered at Abbey Road Studios, where George Shilling sat down with John to chat about the studios and his amazing career there.
Where's your shoes? You're fired.
I've just got a D19C. If I put it over the drummer, will it sound like Ringo? And you said no, it sounds
That's right.
Jane Howard, that's me, with the help of Tape Community Music and Film, have brought the conversation to life through my animations.
So, what was the question?
I don't know. I'm going to look at my mobile phone because in the last clap. You want to clap, please? Round of applause for John Leckie, please. Is that useful for singing purposes? There's one on its own. The sound of one hand clapping. So I'm going to be looking at my mobile phone because during the last 5 minutes since I got the brief on what we're meant to be doing, I've made some copious notes. So here we are. We're in Abbey Road, Studio 3.
Yeah.
I'm George Shilling, and this is John Leckie. And you started work here in 1970.
1970, February 15th I started here, yeah.
Yeah.
Ken Townsend gave me the interview and phoned me up a few weeks later and said, can you start on Monday? So, yeah, and that's it. I haven't looked back. I haven't had a day off since.
And you got the job based on your hair looking a bit like mine?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
They looked me up and down. I had me loon pants on and me Kensington Market T-shirt and hair like that. And you got the job.
I'm still working on it.
Because everyone else, of course, was in suit and tie and quite smart and stuff. I mean, there was a few other people young. I was 19, just coming up to 20 when I started. So, and yeah, the funny thing was that on a Saturday, you see all these people in the week, you know, with suit and tie on. But on a Saturday, they'd come in and they'd have a little roll neck jumper or a cravat or, you know, a polo neck on. So, and sometimes when you see pictures of old Abbey Road session, you can see engineers that haven't got a suit and tie, and you go, I bet that was a Saturday, you know.
Was that because you could get away with it on a Saturday because there was nobody to tell you off for not looking smart, or was it
That's
just,
right, yeah.
It wasn't the rules.
Well, actually, there's a guy called Neil Richmond, apparently, who I took over his job, and he got sacked because, what's the guy's name? Walter Stagg was the manager before Gus Cook, before Stagg was the manager, and he came in, and Neil Richmond was the tape op doing a session in 2, I think it was Pretty Things, and he'd taken his shoes off because it was like 3 o'clock in the morning or something, and he just had his socks on, and the manager walked in and go, where's your shoes? You're fired. And sacked him immediately for not wearing shoes on the session, and that's how I got his job.
There's a top tip.
Anyway.
So what was the job? Was it tape operator, T-boy? What was it?
No, it was tape operator. So
Yeah.
I was employed as a tape op. I'd come from Ravensbourne College of Art. I did a film and TV course called Moving Picture Communication. I thought it was a film college and I was going to come out of college and be a film director. And of course that wasn't the way, and I couldn't get a job, and you had to be in the union and this kind of thing. And so I worked in a little film company in the West End for a bit and just wrote to all the studios, and Abbey Road gave me the job, so that was it. I haven't looked back, really.
How did you find out where to write to? In those days, there wasn't you couldn't go on the internet and look it up, could you?
Looked in the phone book,
really.
Yeah.
Did you accidentally write to a few fashion studios and photography studios?
No, I worked
managed
at
to work
EMI
out?
recording studios, Decca, Broadhurst Gardens, Olympic, and that one in Portland Place, ICP, is it called? IPC? IPC, not IC. IPC, yeah. So yeah, there was only 4 or 5 studios. So.
Oh, I see, right. It wasn't like the Music Week directory when I was trying to do it in the 1980s.
No, there was hardly any studio. But, so yeah, I got the job as a tape op, and basically my training was you sit there and watch, don't touch anything, and just watch what's going on. So I'm off to ask what the first session was, and I think it was Procol Harum doing the Salty Dog album in Studio 2. Engineers at the time would have been Peter Bown, who taught me a lot, used to let me do things. The best thing about Pete Bown is he'd been here since before the war. I think he got the job with Stuart Elton. The pop engineers were Peter Bown and Stuart Elton. And there was quite a sharp division between pop and classical. I mean, they even had different EQs in those mixers back there. If it was a pop session, they'd put the pop EQ in, and if it was a classical session, they'd strap in they were plugins, because you actually plugged them into the red desk there. Yeah. In the same way that the engineers, classical engineers would never do a pop session, and pop would never do a classical session.
So you mainly did the assisting on the pop sessions, did you?
Yeah. No, well, I did, and classical, so you would basically do whatever you were put on. So you might, for instance, be put on Pink Floyd, which, I'd grab the chance to do any underground bands, I'd be on them, like a shot, like put my name down. And you could put your name down, or you were told. Very often you were told to do tape hopping on a classical session, for instance, in Studio One, which would have been Chris Parker. I think Lester talked about Chris Parker, Bob Gooch, the classical engineers, classical producers, and they were all recorded. I remember I did a series of Sir Adrian Boult doing Beethoven symphonies for HMV in Studio One. And I think I spent the whole of 1970 mornings, every morning, tape hopping that. And when I met Nigel Kennedy, Nigel, and I told him I'd done this, and Nigel was just like, oh man, it was like, this is fantastic. They were the greatest recordings ever of Beethoven symphonies, which was done down there, and they were all recorded stereo, straight to stereo, and you'd have two machines. At that time we were actually running A62s, which you don't see much now, not A80s, they were A62 Studers at 15 without Dolby. Dolby wasn't even invented in those days, and you'd run two of them as a master and just log what movements, the numbers on the score, and what your timer was, and then they'd come in for a playback. And the first thing you learn on a classical session is not to cough during the playback, because they all come in and there's playback, and you might play a whole movement back, so it might be a 20-minute playback, and you're sitting there and you're dying to go to the toilet or something, or you're dying to cough, and you can't, because everyone's like studying the scores and things. So
if they hear a cough, they think it's on the recording.
They think it's on the recording, yeah. And then sometimes you do operas, when they'd record 4-track on J37 opera, which would basically be stereo orchestra and stereo voices. So all the soloists and the choir would be on 2 tracks, and the orchestra would be on another 2 tracks.
But recorded simultaneously?
Oh yeah, recorded simultaneously, yeah.
And would each singer have their own mic?
No, the singers would move across the stereo as per the instructions, the stage instructions for the opera, so the singers would move. And it was all done, it was more or less 2 straight stereos. Yeah. But you had the option to mix, you see, and mixing involved putting the faders level and listening to the whole side that had been edited by the editors. So there was a team down the side of the building there, the ramp down to Studio One. There's 3 rooms there. I think they've now built a studio, but they were 3 editing rooms, and there were 3 guys there. David Bell was the main editor, and they were classical editors, so there was so much classical work going on that you'd record it all in sections and bits, and then the producer would give the editor the score and all the tapes, and he would just edit according to the notes, and but before that, of course, there was a playback, and one of the worst things for a tape op to be put on, if you're into the music, it's one of the best, but you'll be put on a week's playback, classical playback, which would basically sit in with a classical producer, and he'd go, play me take 56, so you'd have to find take 56, spool it forward, play take 50, now play me 24, and you spool it off and find it, because no one else could touch the masters. The only way of playing back was to play the master tape, because there was no copies, there was no CDs, there was no cassettes. It would, if you'd have a 7.5 copy was really the playback thing, and so the only way the producer could hear the takes would be to have a playback, and the only person that could handle the tape was a qualified person being the tape op. So that was often like you'd go up to Vera's room and she'd put you on a week or 2 weeks, 9 till 5:30 of solo violin or something, or some German woman singing or something for every day for 2 weeks. You'd do that, and then the next day you'd spend all weekend staying up all night with Pink Floyd or Edgar Broughton Band or something, you know. Yeah.
Was that all right, Mike?
That was fantastic.
Is that the sort of thing you wanted?